Guys, welcome back to Spooky Witches UK. Before I get into today's video, I need you to go ahead and smash that subscribe button so you can keep seeing my face on your screens. Let me just put that on silent. So today I'm going to be talking about the Bell Witch. Because obviously here at Spooky Witches UK we love all the things spooky, scary, unusual and mysterious. So this is a story about how a family was tormented in Tennessee over 200 years ago. This story went on to inspire horror movies and the likes, but what makes this particular story more believable is the numerous eyewitness accounts, the affidavits, documents that have been written by those involved. So in 1804, a man named John Bell and his family had settled on 300 acres of land in Robertson County, Tennessee, which is now known as Adams, Tennessee. He lived quite peacefully there until just over a decade later, in 1817. That's when things started going south a little bit. Now, it started out how most hauntings start out, with a few noises here and there, banging on doors, people hitting walls from the outside, even rattling of chains. Basic paranormal stuff. Anyway, it carried on like that until a creature showed up. It's the only way I can put it, is creature. And it was described as having the body of a dog and the head of a rabbit. And they couldn't identify what it was, but they were certain it didn't belong there. Now, the noises that the Bell family were experiencing began getting worse as each night drew in. And often John Bell and his sons would rush outside to try and catch the culprit who were banging on the walls, but they always found nothing. They always found no one. So as things had started to escalate, the Bell children began waking up, terrified, saying that there was rats gnawing on the bedposts and that the covers were being ripped off them in the middle of the night and the pillows being thrown on the floor. And again, as all this activity carried on, the Bell family began hearing faint whispering, which was too quiet for them to be able to understand it properly, but apparently it sounded like an older lady singing hymns. So the events then became even worse as John Bell's youngest daughter, Betsy, started being physically assaulted by the spirit. It would pull her hair and slap her, and it would leave welts and handprints all over her face and her body. John Bell had vowed to keep this a family secret until things had become so bad he shared his problem with his neighbour and closest friend, James Johnston. Now, James was sceptical at first, so him and his wife spent the night at the Bell home, and everything was peaceful until everyone had retired for the night, and that it was then that James and his wife started to experience some of the terrifying things that John and his family had been subjected to. So the bed covers were ripped off the Johnstons and James was slapped. It was then he jumped out of bed and shouted, "In the name of the Lord, who are you and what do you want?" The spirit never replied. However, everything was peaceful for the rest of the night, and the following morning Mr. Johnson told John Bell he believed that the culprit was an, quote, evil spirit, the kind the Bible talks about, end quote. The spirit's voice grew over time, becoming louder and louder and louder. It would sing hymns and even quoted two different sermons which were said at the same time on the same day, 13 miles apart. Now obviously the rumours of this paranormal event spread all the way to Nashville, where General Andrew Jackson became intrigued. Now the Bell sons had served under him in the Battle of New Orleans, so Jackson had travelled to Tennessee to see for himself, and when he arrived, the wagon him and his men had brought with them got stuck in some mud, and as they tried to free it, they exclaimed that it must be the Bell Witch, to which she had then spoke to them and basically just let them pass, saying that she would visit them later. After setting up camp in John Bell's yard, the men, without fail, were indeed visited and said that the following morning they headed back to Nashville, not wanting to stay at the Bell home. Now, this spirit had identified herself as Kate Batts. Now, Kate Batts was a neighbour of the Bells, who John had had some bad dealings with, so from then on they referred to the spirit as Kate. So Kate, the spirit, continued tormenting the family, and it got so bad it caused Betsy, the daughter of John Bell, to call off her engagement, and eventually, due to the declining health of John Bell, he became confined to the house, unable to leave. The spirit Kate only sought to torment him further, removing his shoes if he tried to walk, slapping him after his seizures. She would curse and chastise old Jack Bell, which was the nickname that she had given him. Now, on the morning of December 20th, 1820, John Bell passed away. Immediately after his death, his family ended up finding a vial of black substance. John Jr. had dropped a few drops onto the cat's tongue. The cat jumped into the air, rolled over, and was dead before it hit the ground. Kate, the spirit, piped up and said, I gave old Jack a big old dose of that last night, which fixed him. John Jr. threw the vial into the fire, where a blue flame erupted and travelled up the chimney. Now, during the funeral of John Bell, the spirit interrupted the mourners, and I shouldn't laugh, right? But the spirit interrupted the mourners by singing songs, and she didn't stop until the last mourner had left. Now, in 1821, shortly after Betsy had called off her engagement and shortly after the passing of John Bell, the spirit, who had been very quiet up to then, came back to visit John Bell's widow, Lucy. She told Lucy she was leaving but would return 7 years later. Now, she was never really horrible to Lucy, the spirit. She was never really horrible to Lucy, but anyway, she returned in 1828, and John Bell Jr. and the spirit, Kate, had many conversations after her return about the meaning of her life, religion, and her predictions on the Civil War and things like that. The entity left after 3 weeks, saying she would return in 107 years' time to the direct descendants of John Bell Jr., and the year would have been 1935. However, no one actually knows if the spirit returned in 1935, as there is no recorded account of her doing so. So, did she return? Did they just not, write it down? Did they not acknowledge it? Did she ever leave? But that is it. That is the story of the Bell Witch. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I will link the articles I used for my research in the description box. So please leave a comment, let me know what you think. Let's start a discussion about it. Discuss this with me. But that is all from me today. I will see all you guys on Tuesday. Please stay safe out there. I love you all, and as always, stay spooky, witches.